Time to talk more of the Australian Ice Hockey League here on Sports Overnight. The Melbourne Ice defeating the Newcastle North Stars 6-4 in a close encounter on the weekend, and a 12-point lead at the top of the Australian Ice Hockey League standings. And from the Melbourne Ice, Jason Baclig, one of their players born and raised overseas but doing his thing here in Australia, is joining us now. Jason, congrats on the win on the weekend.
Thanks a lot, Hamish. How are you?
Going really well. Tell us about the match.
It was a great match, actually. We were a little skeptical coming in. We only had 10 guys on the roster, defensemen and forwards and 2 goalies. So we had to play smart to beat them. They're a fast team, but I think we're stronger in depth, and really showed this weekend with us having the same amount of guys as Newcastle and us coming out on top.
What did you make of that game about a month or so ago when Newcastle was involved in that, I think, 14-4 job against Canberra?
It was very, very surprising, and I think that was the start of eyes opening around the league as to where the Canberra Knights are coming from. They had a little slump in the first part of the season, but their imports and locals have really stepped it up, and they're making a run at the end of the season. But it might be a little too late for them, but they're definitely making an impact and catching the eyes of every team around the league.
You guys have got a 12-point lead at top of the ladder. For various details, people can head to the website, which is theaihl.com. Who is the best team you played this year, Jason?
We've had our battle against every team. I've mentioned before that the Sydney Ice Dogs were a team to look at, and they're creeping up as well. But Newcastle in their home rink is really tough to beat. We lost to them just in the dying seconds in the first game there against them, and we managed to squeeze one out just a couple weeks ago. But Canberra in their own rink, us definitely, I think with our facility, we're the toughest team to beat, but there are a lot of teams who are very tough to beat in their arena.
Jason, you played a lot overseas, born and raised in Canada, as I said in the intro. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? How did you end up playing ice hockey in Australia?
It's a long story. I was planning on going. I was planning to eventually come over to Australia just to visit, and I had no idea there was ice hockey here. And I was over in Europe playing professionally for 2 years, or for 3 years, sorry. And I haven't seen much of my partner, and she was the one who actually dragged me here. She was enrolled at La Trobe. She recently graduated, and I've been away from her so long. I was like, I'll come for the summer, spend a season in Australia, enjoy the weather. And after being here for 3 days in Victoria, I love the city. It's a great facility that we play at the Ice House, and I had to say no to going back to play pro overseas after 3 days of being here. So it's been a long journey, and it's really nice to be able to call the Docklands and Melbourne my home for the next year or two. So it's great.
How did your family and friends react to that? I mean, you've been playing in the Northern Hemisphere, where presumably there's a lot more ice hockey, and there's a lot more of an ice hockey community going on there. When you turn around and rung your parents or rung your best mate and said, I'm staying in Australia to play ice hockey, what was their response?
A lot of people weren't surprised, actually. I've had a lot of people from my hometown and part of the world who have come over here, especially in Melbourne, and who have ended up planning to stay, just for 6 months or a year, and they end up staying for the rest of their lives and trying to get citizenship and residency. So it wasn't a big surprise. I know my family wasn't surprised at all, just because of the things that happened, what they've seen with the AIHL blowing up the way it has. We have the live broadcast now from Melbourne Ice and the live radio from teams around the league. It's just amazing how professional the league has become in that aspect. And I think, over the years, and it'll start to make leaps and bounds even more than what it has already.
When we've spoken with some other players who are playing overseas or from overseas and are playing here this year, we've talked a little bit about the standard and things on the ice compared to some of the leagues, the likes of Germany and Netherlands that you play in. How do you compare the professionalism? Because you've spoken a little bit about how surprised you were about the professionalism of the Australian league. Oh,
definitely. Just the transportation in this league, in order to fly everywhere and to play in these certain. Australia is not a very small country, and to be able to have teams pretty much from top to bottom, left to right, is something to be boastful about, because in order to organize all these flights, there's a lot of money that has to be involved, and a lot of all the teams are non-for-profit, and it's just for the love of the game. It's unbelievable to see how much it has grown since I've been here alone, and just the exposure it's getting is gonna get such like a more professional league than it is already. So I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes from here.
Now, you're from a place in Ontario in Canada, which, speaking with Jason Baclig for the Melbourne Ice and the Australian Ice Hockey League, you're from a place, the population is only about 30,000, but you've had sort of 5 or 6 notable NHL players. Is that a sort of a particularly high percentage for a small town?
Canada's such a big place, and that's what we do in the wintertime. When the lakes and ponds freeze over, we jump on the ice, and it's not relatively high percentage, but from every little town here and there, you'll get 1 or 2, and it's amazing how the community rallies around that one person, and that person represents the whole town and the area where they're from, and it's something to be proud of as a Canadian, because it's our sport, and we love the game, so it's great.
Can you take us back to where you were when you watched that Vancouver Winter Olympics grand final?
I was actually in the Netherlands. We had a practice that night. At that time, our coach let us sit in the bar in our gear up the first period, and and we actually went out to practice for 30 minutes. And he said, if you work hard, we'll send you home and you can watch the game at the local pub and everything. So I got to watch the first period and the last period and the eventual overtime winner from Sidney Crosby. So it was amazing. My roommate was also Canadian, and my other roommate was from Boston. He was American. So in the end, it was good to see the USA back up, top ranks against Canada. But it's always a pleasure to watch Canada win.
Yeah, it certainly was a terrific advertisement for the sport. Jason, the other thing is about where you live is, in my research for this interview, I've found that it's got the best nicknames and the best motto of any town, city or country I think I've ever seen. Leamington is the sun parlour of Canada, the tomato capital of Canada, and the motto is Southern Latitude, Friendly Attitude. What's going on there?
That's right. A lot of people, when I say, I'm 45 minutes southeast of, an American city, people go, are you kidding me? Because everybody thinks that, Canada's all igloos and, we don't even play baseball and stuff like that. But our summers back home are just as warm as the summers here. It might not be as long, but we do have, 40-plus degrees centigrade days of heat and heat waves that go through. And we also get minus 10 to 15. So a lot of real Canadians kind of chirp at us and say we're not really Canadian because we don't experience minus 30, minus 40, Celsius days. We do get a lot of sun, and we live along the lake, so it's a great place to be in Canada.
And presumably grow a lot of tomatoes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We're chatting with Jason Baclig for the Melbourne Ice, the Australian Ice Hockey League. Jason, in that run into the finals, you mentioned there sort of about some of the other sides that you think are playing well. You guys have got that lead at the top. Is there, of those other sides you mentioned, Canberra, is there one that's perhaps going to make a run and just edge into the finals, or do you think the finals are set as they are?
Definitely not. I know the top. I mean, I think we're going to be tough to get if we, assuming that we win out the rest of our games. But second, third, fourth place are definitely up for grabs. The third and fourth spot, especially, there's a couple teams with Gold Coast, unfortunately losing the 3 points due to a forfeit, which is unfortunate if they do end up, being short 3 points. But there are 4 or 5 teams just battling it out, and it's going to be very interesting to see who ends up the top 4.
At the moment, yourselves with that 12-point lead. Newcastle 44, Sydney Ice Dogs 36, Adelaide Adrenaline 32, the Gold Coast Blue Tongues you mentioned there with 30, and then it's down to the Mustangs, which is the new Melbourne side for this year, 23, Canberra 21, and the Sydney Bears 13. Jason, I really appreciate joining us on the show. Continued success with the Melbourne Ice this year in the Australian Ice Hockey League. Thanks again for joining us.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Jason Baclig from the Melbourne Ice and the Australian Ice Hockey League, getting towards the finals. The AIHL.com for further details, and the AIHL MVP favourites on the list is Jason, and we'll follow it towards the end of the season.